We go live to the Convention Palace in Havana, Cuba, where President Miguel Diaz-Canel is offering statements. Let's listen.
In the middle of dramatic situation as a Florida hurricane and all the poverty inherited in the system before, the moments are difficult, but history, which precedes, is inspiring, heroic, that it's by itself respond to all the questions with the always challenge of the phrase that the Chief of Army taught us to face the difficulties. Yes, we can do it. Physically, Fidel is not here. It's true, but his ideas are here and his legacy are here, and Raúl is here, and one part of a historic generation with his feet on the horse, supervising and helping us to make continuity to the revolution, to remind us that in the middle of the challenges, Cuba has achieved one of the best indicators of human development. They're here to show what the history has said, that the nation counts on a fundamental force to overcome all the difficulties. Raúl called it the daughter of our eyes, unity. In a scenery so difficult as we are passing through, the unity is the principal soul to resist and overcome. It's not the unity on the slogan. We have to criticize is the unity from the participation of the people, is the commitment to act, to look for a purpose and an ideal, to save the homeland, to keep it and develop the revolution and socialism, the only guarantee to preserve and to strengthen the social justice that this people conquered in more than 150 years of fight, and that will not renounce ever. All who decide to contribute to this mission count as indispensable for the revolution. It's a very legitimate debate, and the confrontation is very useful, that always will be provoking. Nobody doubts that from that will come out the best decision, the best contributions dictated for the purpose to overcome difficulties and to go on. Another thing is the disqualification of each step that we do. The predisposition, it reflects a preposition that only provokes dismobilization and discouragement. Comrades, Cuba lives, works, resists, and creates under the bombs a war that has the objective, the economic activity. The objective is to surrender the people by starving it under the threat of the policy of the aggression, in which in 1961-60 the United States memorandum says that it was trying to starve the country. This is responsibility of the Cuban government and state to challenge that contingency of a creative moment. And the direction of the country is not resting to face this economic scenario that is impacting the quality of life of the people. I know that some people question the use of the concept of war economy because, and I'm not going to use it. I'm not going to discuss the theory. I'm only asking, starting from fact and from the hard reality that we live, can we call economy without any objective the one that is forced to operate with the threat, with the difficulties of the financial institution in a world that is interconnected? What definition to give if we have to import food from the United States, which is our closest trade? We have to have specific licenses, pay cash without any credit and in advance, what no other country is demanded. How can you define the difficult mechanism to get fuel under persecution to the governments that are willing to sell them, to deny Cuba the access of products which are 10% of component from the United States. Also, we have to do everything under a threat in case they are known by the United States to submit the principal enterprises of the country to the because they are included in the list of and have difficulties of financing in everywhere. These are very undeniable things of a war economy. There's no other government submitted to an equal war so long and supported by laws of other countries that gravitate on the economy, like the Torricelli and Burton, which were set up in order to change the political system in Cuba. We're living under conditions that no other country is operating. How do we call that? Comrades, the complex situation in the country is reflected in all the sectors of the economy. There's no other sector that is, one of the areas that is more significant is the impossibility to assure the supply of the products of a basic food basket, the instability of the power system here in the country, the electricity, and the control of prices, speculative prices, abusive prices that are limiting the purchasing power of the population. Parallelly, and as a consequence of the shortages and limitations, the manifestation of lack of disciplines, social discipline, are also coming out, adding to the problems. This situation demands implementing right-away actions, very supported with the right control, which should be supported with education strategy and an institutional strategy. Prime Minister Comrade Marrero presented to this assembly the state of the implementation of the government projections to correct distortions and to boost the economy in the first semester. And at the same time, he said that the direction that we would concentrate our efforts in the remaining of the year, which constitutes a summon to work, and that we should support to contribute to concrete results. It's time to overcome the diagnosis and to go into actions. We should have to make implementations, the objectives, to prepare better the people that are supposed to carry out these instructions, ordering the actions not to be left in the discourse, and also to control the corrections and the adjustments with feedback, with the feedback. In relation to our responsibility in this uncertain scenario of the economy, we have to recognize that trying to comply with the policies of the 8th Congress of the party and to create the creation of the private companies, we acknowledge that there were no conditions, the proper conditions to do this on a favorable results. The controls that we carried out afterwards, we proved that these processes did not correspond to what the state wanted with the transparency that an organized society needs. No violation of the legality of the country can question the demands coming out of the errors and distortions of the process. As we have said, in this moment, there should be order and law if we want these laws succeed. I would like to reiterate that this is not a witch hunt against the private companies, as some people are saying, manipulate or suggest. The facing is against the out of control, the illegality, the evasion of fiscal, legal, and frauds, whatever they come from, even the state. be non-state or state enterprises. This is a battle against illegality and not against the forms of property and management. The creation of a non-state forms of management is a result of a policy approved by the Congress of the party after a popular consultation to discuss the linings of the Congress, and it's our responsibility to make it comply. The private companies were conceived as a part of to support the production of the country. However, we had a distortion. One part of those companies have devoted themselves to import things, which, even though they solve problems of the people of Cuba, they don't actually contribute to the development of the country. And the state enterprise, together with the non-state companies, should go on rapidly, harmoniously in the productive process of the country. We have the conviction, and we are promoting it, that one of the most sure ways to help to increase the well-being of the people is to work from the basis. But we have to start to put order, not only to the non-state companies, because when we talk about this, we're not talking about the control, but also the vandalization of process with efficiency, for the necessity to innovate, to break inertia, to move in the sense of the development that is urgent. The MIPYME's Cuban private companies are not conceived only for the non-state companies area. However, the dynamic of formation of these companies in the sector of a state has been practically null. Despite of the fact of some experiences, healthy experiences, I can say some factories that were actually inefficient, and when they were transformed to the new form of management, the same thing happened with the sector of communication. The MIPYME are designed for the enterprise of high technology, take advantage of the capacity. And I called to the attention of the negative tendencies that we should face in the society, and to what I referred recently in the off-tape plenum in the Congress of the party. The government of the United States, the extreme far sectors of the counter-revolution, in their offensive, they are actually promoting an insecurity scenario in favor of their destabilization proposals. The action of the Ministry of Interior, of the justice organs, together with the people, has allowed in the last years to discover, to prevent, and to face multiple crimes, and that have been possible with more rigor in the sector of crime, penitentiary, and in the case of accused, sanctioned for crimes of high social delinquency. Despite of that, the situation of crime, corruption, the illegalities, and social indisciplines are complex and are also characterized, and also in the same context of a situation that we live in. Army General said once that the struggle against corruption cannot be lenient, and we have to be implacable against those illegalities. This call is still vital, and we have to strengthen that to promote the more honest and dignified activities. We also have to strengthen the work of education. We have to improve the mechanisms of the popular force, and also the responsibility of officials, and also of the we have to also work in the discovery of crimes, following the duty and the guarantees. We have heard today the peasants from Leva Paz, and we have seen that they have contributing to the supervising the problems. What is the proposal to face in another way? Today is actually needed to contribute with ideas and solutions that involve the whole society in the facing of the crime. If one country has experience, and that is Cuba, tolerance zero to those who are taking advantage of the difficulties, of the economic difficulties, to enrich without contributing. Tolerance zero to those that are actually people that are actually supporting crime. And also, if law has to be severe, this assembly will have to decide, because this has to be that, and a small nation that has faced with courage to the greatest power of the history will not let itself conquered by delinquency. Comrades, the months so far have shown with clear a very serious scenario in 2024, when more visible are threats to peace by the political order, international order, with their contradictions and with their unjust nature, which promotes this inequality, the polarization, and a gross concentration of wealth, more exclusive. The primacy of one power that is dictating his will in the globe is actually leading to dead end. It's what happens when you try to put the world in two options: sovereignty or surrendering. Under that philosophy, it's those who are subordinated to the dictations of the imperialisms are awarded, whilst the nations that are defending their rights to development in a world are attacked and blockaded. The diplomacy is being abused and is all the time less considered to resolve the greatest conflict. It's paradoxical, indignant to see how one after all important events, international events, are happening once after all, and high-level meetings with different characters in different parts of the world at the same time, that at the side of everybody, the crime of genocide against the Palestine people is an affront to humanity, that while millions of people are mobilizing in all latitudes against that Holocaust, the so-called international community, representing those millions of people of the world in the global organisms, are incapable of stopping this massacre, only because the genocides are actually receive the complicity of the United States government and other powerful governments allied to annexionism. In this scenario, complex scenario, in which I have described very briefly, the Cuban Revolution has continued to strengthen his bilateral link with other countries. We have intensified contacts with several governments, also to change political ideas in defense of the peace, as to intensify commercial trade links and to evade blockade effects and explore economic opportunities of mutual benefit. We continue to identify ourselves with the just cause, and we have offered the country as a space of dialogue and deliberation to do that. In April, together with the International Progressists, it was celebrated in Havana an international congress to mark the 50th anniversary of 1974 in the United Nations of a resolution that gave origin to New Order, International Order. This step that was promoted at that moment for the non-allied countries and the Group of 77 marked one of the most transcendental efforts of the countries of the world to continue the battle against colonization. We wanted to avoid that this anniversary was forgotten at the same time that developing countries, and as a reminding the majority of the inhabitants of the planet, we actually carrying the burden of the economic measures and financial measures established by the same powers that condemned us to underdevelopment through colonialism, through slavery, and through the plundering of our resources. Here I stop to share with you ideas which I think are value. For that, I take fragments of a recent reflection about colonization and education of the young president of the Casa de las Americas, and I cite, the cultural colonization is a phenomenon which is very important to reflect, to think permanently, and that involves the whole humanity because it affects in particular to the people of the South. We are submitted to pseudo-cultural products through which they would like to impose a society model based on individualism, banalization, the call to trivial things, to say in the phrase, to live at the moment and give little credit to future. The cultural colonization is truly crucial. The fight against that is crucial and has to be analyzed systematically to generate in our communities the antidotes necessary to contrast this poison that we see associated to expressions that are intolerant, totalitarian, and let's say neo-fascist. End of quote. Why do I am choosing this reflection apparently far from the situation that we are facing? Because the day that we forget that the humanity conscience is a fundamental support of a socialist society that looks above all the spiritual richness of the people, we will be betrayers of Martí, Raúl, Fidel, Che, and all those who spend all the last cent of their saving and to go to fight against the walls, military walls of Fulgencio Batista to construct a human destiny for Cuba. This endeavor explains why, because why the funds that we have to decide, we have to devote to different sectors of culture, education, which help to support the soul of the country, that in countries in development depends on those expenditures. We celebrate in Havana a new edition and people that are actually worried about the colonization, the monopoly of the communication, and also the emergence of fascist currents and neo-fascists that are actually spreading at the eyes of everybody. This does not prevent us from being involved in activism with emphasis in the region, but with a presence, in a more active presence, which are new for Cuba, like the BRICS and the Eurasia. We continue to comply with the commitments, international commitment, especially we have kept the cooperation, medical health commitments and cooperation that we and the discredit plan by the United States against the medical services of Cuba, appealing to threats against governments, sovereign governments that are receiving these benefits. The lie and the campaign to promote these campaigns are methods that are part of the imperialism. The more scandalous method is a list of the Department of State about countries that allegedly promote terrorism, where Cuba had never was supposed to be there. We are victims of terrorism, but that list is not actually rewarding other terrorists with impunity. The intelligence agencies of those countries and the world can confirm that Cuba does not promote terrorism, that this lie is a fabrication, a dishonest fabrication conceived to strengthen the economic blockade and beat even more the life of the Cuban people. That's why this provokes so much rejection, because dozens of governments in Latin America and the Caribbean are actually claiming to the United States to end this lie and injustice. Also, they tell us that we are actually Groups, social groups inside the United States are also claiming deputies. In the Latin American region and Caribbean, polarization has strengthened the division of society when solidarity should be multiplied before the increasing inequality. The ultra-far right is actually taking advantage of polarization that is provoked by the models of neoliberal models and their failures. Through manipulation and lies, they try to influence government and to try to stop the social advance. Cuba has denounced the permanent intent of generating violence in Venezuela and the Interference Act in their interior problems, which besides they haven't been able to defeat the Bolivarian revolution. We hope and we actually foresee a victory of Nicolás Maduro in the next presidential elections. We have kept the position to defend the peace in Colombia in our conviction of guarantor with the talks with the warring parties, also to the follow-up to the fulfillment of the accord with the FARC-EP. From Cuba, we continue promoting solidarity and cooperation in Latin America and the Caribbean. We defend the strict fulfillment of non-intervention, either direct or indirect, in the internal affairs of any country, but also support without any condition those governments, progressive governments, that can revert centuries of injustice in our region. Compatriots, we are actually touring Cuba. We go municipalities by municipalities, and I can assure you that we have been witness of experiences, some admirable experiences, that talks about everything that can be done in the most difficult circumstances. What we have toured have shown us that Cuba counts with women and men that can overcome the United States blockade. We have seen crops, we have seen that before they were actually plagued with wilderness. We have seen spaces that have been used favorably. We have seen enterprises that they have a belonging sense, filled with an enthusiasm to continue with their efforts to solve the problems, and that they rule out the word defeat from their vocabulary. One of the most important questions that should worry us is how can we turn those experiences in tendency in an atmosphere of success that is generalized across the country. How can we take the experience of these places, the agricultural enterprise 14 de Julio, which has complied with the last harvest, sugarcane harvest, how can we take those experiences of these companies that we have visited, the agriculture products producers, who are a deputy in this assembly, in Placetas, Javier González, the family of Juan Carlos in the sugarcane, the brothers Ulasque in the CC, the twin brothers, the producers of Rasul Castañeda, of the agricultural enterprise, also the producers in the Isle of Pines, in the Isle of Youth, and also the agricultural companies, the agroponics, that constitute an example of cooperation between an enterprise company and the armed forces in Cuba. The performance of state enterprises, the enterprise, the private companies which are contributing with solutions, the heroic workers of the thermoelectrical, only to just mention a few examples of those companies that are actually advancing to prosperity with their own forces, that are today exception, but one day will be generalized, that have the right and the possibility to realize the dream in Cuba. Of course, for this response to arrive, there are many Cubans and that from their places that correspond to us as citizens, we should behave with efforts, with discipline, and with a conscious of what is needed to guarantee projects for prosperity for the wonderful youth of Cuba. There is a potential of invaluable richness in the productive forces, in the capacity, innovation capacity, this quality, innate quality that we inherited from the Mambises, and we have provoked and made us all accomplish all victories. These the philosophy from Fidel Castro of the confidence in the people to trust as we have said before, none of us in solitary know or learn more than all of us together. To overcome the highest obstacles with intelligence, even with wisdom, is not for us an unknown experience. Experience is full of events, but if we had to mention some recent events, let's remember how the Cuban scientists saved a whole people from the effects of COVID-19. That's something that we succeeded in doing, that many times have been told. Even if we tell it many times, it will never stop creating all. It's so much pride that we take all the efforts to take that example to all the sectors of the country. They denied us the oxygen, and nobody should forget this that happened when the COVID-19, we were threatened by a blockade of more than 60 years that boycott life in all areas and that looks for closing all access. Besides that effort that somebody, a friend of Cuba said that it was a genocide. Despite of that, we are still living and we're working. What can we not do without the thunder, without this? We have to learn every day that from the knowledge that we have to have a thinking full of ideas, but also capable of standing up, is a premise without which it would be difficult to advance. It's a duty of each one of us to make the best use of the resources that we have, to keep awake, to keep our thinking awake, to overcome the diversities. We are in the middle of a planet that is actually giving signs. We have to look for this sensibility inside Cuba. Is not defeating us. The day that we forget that the pain of everybody, that day humanity, the humanity of evolution will be in danger, which was born to give a revolution that is putting us over the egotism of, in the difficult times, there are people that are discouraged. There are people that are weak. There are people that betray. There are people that desert. Fidel said that this happened everywhere and in every revolution. But also he said that this in the difficult times when the men are approved, men and women are approved. With his words, he told us that difficult times are the best measure of each one of us. From this truth, we should feel pride for the immensity and nobility of our women, of our children, of our adolescent, youth, elderly, and each protagonist, and above these years and this hour, which is characterized by combat, has represented the capacity shown by people, and even capacities that are not even known of the people to face shortages, provocations, and challenges. We have the spirit so much integrated that it does not know the immobility and to support without moving. The Cubans is of intelligence resistance, is to create something against the current. We talk about not being conformist, to go on to new horizons, to continue doing without listening to voices of the Cuban does do in the act of impossible, as Fidel told us, is worthwhile living and battling and struggling. The best lesson of this hour is the bigness of a people that is being born of his pride, because the rebellion and the sense of dignity and what it means to have to be victorious. At a few hours of 71 years of the assault of the Moncada garrison, which were the engine of the revolution of Raúl Ramiro, we congratulate the people of Santo Espíritus and all Cuba. For his heroism and resistance against the empire, and also because of the rebellious nature in front of the errors, distortion, and negative tendencies that once and for all show in this very winding road to socialism. This generation, committed to the continuity of a revolution of the humble for the humble, will struggle so that we all reach sooner than later a prosperity, an inclusive prosperity that no one gets disprotected. For that we work. Fatherland or death, we will overcome. These were the words of our first secretary. I conclude the third ordinary period of session of our National Assembly in its 10th legislature. Yelling as never before, we continue on the 26th. Everybody in combat at the height of the historic moments that we live. We shall overcome.
We were listening to the Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel, who offered statements during the closure of the recent session of the National Assembly of the People's Power in Havana, Cuba. During his intervention, the President assured that Cuba can overcome the U.S. blockade and the difficult circumstances it causes through unity and the people's will and commitment to move their homeland forward. This is all for the moment. More information in upcoming news briefs.